Matilda wasn't just a children's movie. It was a story about survival in broken homes and cruel classrooms. But time is far more ruthless than fiction. By 2026, the cast had taken paths no one could predict. What really happened? And what price did they pay? Danny DeVito as Harry Wormwood. Harry Wormwood, the corrupt, domineering father in Matilda, was played by Danny DeVito. At 52 years old, he transformed exaggeration into something uncomfortably recognizable. His performance blended cruelty with comedy in equal measure. That tension mirrored a life shaped by resistance rather than ease. Born on November 17, 1944, in Neptune Township, New Jersey, Daniel Michael DeVito Jr. grew up enduring constant ridicule due to his short stature, caused by a rare genetic disorder. He married actress Rhea Perlman in 1982, building a long partnership that included 3 children and decades of professional overlap. Their relationship later shifted into separation without divorce, maintaining emotional closeness rather than collapse. During that time, his breakthrough on Taxi earned him both an Emmy Award and a Golden Globe. DeVito's condition, multiple epiphyseal dysplasia, shaped not only his body, but how the industry perceived him. Rather than limiting his career, it sharpened his presence, forcing him to command attention through voice, timing, and intensity. While continuing to act, he expanded into directing and producing, placing control where performance alone could not. His later career emphasized longevity over reinvention. Through It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he remained culturally relevant across generations, leaning into excess rather than retreating from it. His work behind the camera further reinforced his influence, shaping projects that outlived trends. Today, he is 82 years old, still selectively active as an actor, producer, and creative force. With an estimated net worth of approximately $80 million, accumulated through ownership as much as performance, Danny DeVito stands as evidence that endurance in Hollywood can be built without conformity or retreat. Mara Wilson as Matilda Wormwood. Matilda Wormwood, the exceptionally intelligent child in Matilda, was portrayed by Mara Wilson. At 9 years old, she gave life to a girl whose sharp mind masked deep emotional isolation. The role unsettled audiences without them fully realizing why. What the film never showed was how closely that isolation reflected her real world. Born on July 24, 1987, in Los Angeles, California, Mara Elizabeth Wilson entered Hollywood after she decided not to marry. She chose independence over traditional domestic life while openly identifying as bisexual. During the height of her fame, she was balancing global recognition from Mrs. Doubtfire and Miracle on 34th Street with devastating personal loss, as her mother died of breast cancer in 1996. That rupture permanently altered her emotional foundation and her relationship with fame. The psychological impact surfaced quickly. Mara was later diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, alongside anxiety and depression, conditions she has spoken about publicly. These struggles intensified under public scrutiny, turning acting into a source of distress rather than expression. Despite critical praise and receiving a Young Artist Award, the cost to her mental health became impossible to ignore. Stepping away from film was not a retreat, but a recalibration. Mara redirected her energy toward writing and education, studying literature and later graduating from New York University. Her memoir, Where Am I Now?, exposed the internal damage caused by childhood fame with precision, reshaping how former child stars speak about survival. Now she is 39 years old, living a deliberately private life, focused on writing, advocacy, and mental health work, while managing chronic conditions including endometriosis and POTS. Her estimated net worth of around $500,000 reflects a career that traded longevity for autonomy. Rhea Perlman as Zinnia Wormwood. Zinnia Wormwood, the negligent, self-absorbed mother in Matilda, was portrayed by Rhea Perlman. At 48 years old, she turned indifference into something disturbingly casual. The character was played for laughs, yet felt uncomfortably real. That unsettling realism was not an accident. Born on March 31, 1948 in Brooklyn, New York, Rhea Jo Perlman grew up under stability fractured when her parents divorced. It reshaped her understanding of marriage and emotional endurance. She married fellow actor Danny DeVito in 1982, and together they built a long, unconventional partnership that produced 3 children and decades of professional overlap. While global audiences knew her as Carla Tortelli on Cheers, the success also narrowed how the industry viewed her, limiting access to serious leading roles even as her credibility grew. Years of continuous production schedules and public exposure required resilience rather than reinvention. She endured the strain quietly, without retreating from work or visibility. As her career matured, she refused disappearance. Film roles such as Canadian Bacon and later Barbie, where she portrayed Ruth Handler, demonstrated longevity rather than reinvention. Writing also became part of her control, allowing her to shape stories without performance constraints. The shift was deliberate, not reactive. In 2026, she is 78 years old, continuing to appear selectively on screen while maintaining influence behind the scenes. With an estimated net worth of around $60 million, built through acting and long-term television success, Rhea Perlman stands as a figure who endured typecasting without being erased by it. Embeth Davidtz as Miss Honey. Miss Honey, the gentle, quietly wounded teacher in Matilda, was played by Embeth Davidtz. At 31 years old, she embodied kindness shaped by restraint rather than sentimentality. The softness of the role concealed deep emotional damage. That restraint was rooted far outside the classroom. Born on August 11, 1965, in Lafayette, Indiana, Embeth Jean Davidtz spent her formative years moving between countries, eventually growing up in South Africa after her family emigrated from the United States. Cultural displacement and language barriers fostered isolation rather than belonging. She later married attorney Jason Sloan in 2002, building a stable family life with 2 children while navigating an international acting career that included Schindler's List and The Amazing Spider-Man, roles that established her credibility. Her life took a severe turn when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, requiring surgery, chemotherapy, and extended recovery. The illness interrupted her career and redefined her relationship with her own body. She later integrated that experience directly into her work, refusing concealment and choosing authenticity over illusion. Recovery altered her creative direction. Acting resumed with greater selectivity, and directing emerged as a new form of authorship. Her later work carried emotional precision rather than volume, shaped by survival rather than ambition. Today, she is 61 years old, continuing to act and direct while maintaining a measured presence in the industry. With an estimated net worth of around $5 million, earned through decades of consistent work rather than spectacle, Embeth Davidtz represents endurance built on restraint, not exposure. Paul Reubens, as FBI Agent Bob, the absurdly restrained authority figure in Matilda, was played by Paul Reubens. At 44 years old, he delivered control through understatement. The role contrasted sharply with the chaos audiences associated with him. But behind it stood a lifetime of carefully managed identity. Born on August 27, 1952, in Peekskill, New York, Paul Reubens grew up feeling exposed and targeted for his eccentricity, learning early how ridicule shapes survival. He never married and lived largely alone, devoting himself to creation rather than domestic stability. Fame arrived through Pee-wee's Playhouse, a cultural phenomenon that earned a Daytime Emmy Award, but that success also built a fragile public persona unable to absorb scandal. In whole life, Reubens lived with lung cancer and bone marrow cancer, diagnoses he kept private for 6 years. Treatment, decline, and fear unfolded in silence, mirroring the secrecy that had defined much of his personal life. Career damage came swiftly after the 1991 scandal, severing contracts and erasing momentum. Though he returned in projects like Batman Returns and later revived Pee-wee for new audiences, the recovery never fully restored what was lost. Paul Reubens died at the age of 70 on July 30, 2023, from acute hypoxic respiratory failure related to metastatic lung cancer. He was cremated, and his remains were interred at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $5 million, the residue of a career built on imagination, concealment, and endurance. Pam Ferris as Agatha Trunchbull. Agatha Trunchbull, the brutal, authoritarian headmistress in Matilda, was portrayed by Pam Ferris. At 48 years old, she embodied cruelty with terrifying physical control. The character was exaggerated, yet disturbingly believable. That performance left a mark far beyond the classroom. What the audience did not see was how much discipline stood behind that rage. Born on May 11, 1948 in Hanover, Germany, Pamela Ferris grew up under constant movement and pressure due to her father's military career, a childhood shaped by relocation and instability. Raised between New Zealand and the United Kingdom, she learned early how authority functioned inside rigid systems. In 1986, she married actor Roger Frost, choosing a quiet marriage without children. She later described it as deliberate rather than tragic. Like her marriage, her television success expanded with roles in The Darling Buds of May and later Call the Midwife. The industry increasingly confined her to severe, dominating figures. She carried the strain of physically imposing roles without publicized illness, relying on stamina and control rather than retreat. Professionally, typecasting became a double-edged legacy. Her unforgettable presence in Harry Potter and The Prisoner of Azkaban reinforced her authority-driven image, while her Olivier Award nomination for The Entertainer proved her dramatic range remained intact beneath that surface. Today, she is 78 years old, continuing to work selectively within British productions while living a deliberately private life. With an estimated net worth of around $6 million, earned steadily through British and international acting, Pam Ferris stands as a performer whose power was never loud off-screen, only enduring. Tracy Walter as FBI Agent Bill, FBI Agent Bill, the rigid, unremarkable authority figure in Matilda, was portrayed by Tracy Walter. At 49 years old, he delivered control without charisma. The role appeared briefly, almost fading into the background. That quiet presence mirrored a career built from his real life. Born on November 25, 1947, in Jersey City, New Jersey, Tracy Walter grew up in a working-class neighborhood where stability was fragile and opportunity limited. As the son of a truck driver, he learned early that visibility was not guaranteed and survival required adaptability. Before acting offered direction, he took on small jobs and navigated a rough environment that sharpened observation rather than confidence. When acting entered his life, it did not arrive with glamour. Walter gravitated toward offbeat, supporting figures, men on the edge of power, never at its center. His breakthrough came with Repo Man, where his performance as Miller earned him a Saturn Award. Yet these roles reinforced a pattern: eccentric, expendable, instantly recognizable, but rarely elevated. As years passed, the industry continued to rely on him without redefining him. Collaborations with directors like Jonathan Demme and Danny DeVito kept him working steadily, but always as reinforcement rather than focus. The repetition shaped a career of persistence rather than progression, presence rather than prominence. Now, he is 79 years old, remembered for appearing everywhere while belonging nowhere. With an estimated net worth of around $800,000, built slowly through decades of supporting roles, Tracy Walter's story is not one of disappearance, but of endurance in plain sight. Kiami Davael as Lavender, the mischievous, loyal best friend in Matilda, was played by Kiami Davael. At 10 years old, she brought warmth and curiosity to the story. The character stood beside brilliance rather than leading it. What came next demanded far more than charm. Born on August 21, 1986, in Boyle County, Kentucky, Kiami Davael Daugherty left her home early when her family relocated to California to pursue her acting career. The move separated her from familiarity and placed pressure on performance at an age when stability mattered most. Childhood became structured around auditions, rehearsals, and expectation rather than choice. After Matilda, opportunity narrowed instead of expanding. Appearances on shows like Moesha and The Pretender kept her visible, but momentum never solidified. The industry's attention shifted quickly, and roles became sporadic, forcing a reassessment of direction rather than persistence at any cost. Gradually, creativity moved behind the scenes. Writing and music offered control where acting no longer did. She redirected her focus toward storytelling on her own terms, using education and training to rebuild identity outside early fame. In 2026, she is 40 years old, working as a screenwriter and singer while remaining largely outside the public spotlight. With an estimated net worth of around $200,000 earned through acting and writing, Kiami Davael's journey reflects a quiet transformation rather than disappearance. Brian Levinson as Michael Wormwood. Michael Wormwood, the careless, emotionally distant older brother in Matilda, was played by Brian Levinson. At 14 years old, he projected indifference with unsettling ease. The character existed without empathy, almost hollow. That emotional vacancy lingered with audiences long after the film ended, and for Levinson, pressure arrived before choice ever did. Born on October 27, 1982, in Los Angeles, California, Brian Matthew Levinson was drawn into acting while still forming his sense of self. Childhood for him unfolded under studio lights rather than playgrounds, with long shooting days replacing routine and discipline replacing freedom. Early roles in films like Predator 2 exposed him to adult environments far too soon, where performance was rewarded but emotional development was quietly neglected. After Matilda, the industry did not open its doors the way many expected. Small roles continued, including work connected to hardball, but momentum never stabilized. Auditions blurred together, rejection became familiar, and the gap between childhood recognition and adult opportunity widened. The stress of proving relevance as a former child actor began to outweigh the promise that once fueled him. Finally, Levinson made a decision that Hollywood rarely notices. He stepped back. The industry moved forward without him, and he chose not to chase it. Acting, once imposed as a childhood path, became something he no longer needed to survive. Today, Brian Levinson is 44 years old, living a quiet, private life, far removed from the attention that once defined him. With an estimated net worth of around $100,000 from early acting work, his story stands as a sobering reminder. Childhood visibility does not guarantee longevity, and sometimes the bravest outcome is choosing peace over applause. Jimmy Cars as Bruce Bogtrotter. Bruce Bogtrotter, the ridiculed, defiant boy forced into spectacle in Matilda, was portrayed by Jimmy Cars. At 12 years old, he turned humiliation into endurance. The scene made audiences laugh. For him, it mirrored real pressure which existed long before applause. Born on July 26, 1984, in Los Angeles, California, James Elliott Cars entered acting young, carrying visibility without protection. His appearance made him a target both on and off screen, blurring the line between role and reality. Childhood unfolded under scrutiny rather than safety, shaping caution instead of confidence. After Matilda, roles came, but did not redefine him. A part in The Wedding Singer offered brief recognition, yet Hollywood's interest faded as quickly as it arrived. Acting became a chapter rather than a future, prompting a decision few child actors make early enough. Education replaced audition rooms. Cars left the industry to pursue medicine, trading visibility for discipline. The transition was demanding, requiring distance from the identity that once defined him. Now, he is 42 years old, working as a medical doctor after completing years of rigorous training. With an estimated net worth of around $500,000 earned through his medical career, Jimmy Cars' life stands as a rare example of reinvention through withdrawal rather than regret. Kira Spencer Hesser as Hortensia, the calculating older student enforcing hierarchy in Matilda, was played by Kira Spencer Hesser. At 13 years old, she projected dominance with unsettling ease. The character thrived on intimidation. That adjustment began early. Born on December 26, 1983, in Seattle, Washington, Kira Spencer Hesser experienced a childhood shaped by movement and instability, relocating frequently and adapting quickly. She later married and adopted the surname Cook, marking a personal shift toward grounding as her professional life entered uncertainty. Early promise did not guarantee continuity. As adolescence ended, the industry narrowed its tolerance. The transition from child roles to adult casting introduced friction, and opportunities arrived unevenly. Projects such as Awkward and Immobile Home reflected persistence rather than momentum, keeping her present without defining her. Writing emerged as balance. Screenplays and independent projects allowed her to shape stories rather than wait for them, redirecting creative energy into authorship. Acting remained part of the equation, but no longer the sole measure of progress. Today, she is 43 years old, working as both a writer and actress within independent circles. With an estimated net worth of around $200,000 earned through acting and writing, Kira Spencer Hesser's path reflects adaptation under pressure rather than retreat. Jacqueline Steiger as Amanda Thripp. Amanda Thripp, the fragile student violently punished in Matilda, was played by Jacqueline Steiger. At 10 years old, she became the image of cruelty turned into spectacle. The moment was brief. Its impact was permanent. That moment did not come without preparation. Born on December 26, 1986, in Reseda, California, Jacqueline Lynn Steiger entered acting young, navigating controlled chaos rather than routine. As a child performer, she handled physical demands that required precision and trust, developing resilience early. She remained unmarried, keeping her personal life deliberately quiet while focusing on craft rather than exposure. After Matilda, she continued working through childhood roles, appearing in films like Dennis the Menace Strikes Again and later Beautiful, where she demonstrated emotional range beyond shock value. Yet the transition from child performer to adult actor brought distance instead of acceleration, forcing a pause rather than ascent. Education became a recalibration. After graduating from UCLA, Steiger returned to the industry with a clearer sense of authorship, stepping into producing roles to regain agency over narrative and opportunity. The shift reflected control regained rather than ambition abandoned. In 2026, she is 40 years old, continuing to act and produce on a selective basis. With an estimated net worth of around $300,000, built steadily through performance and production, Jacqueline Steiger's career stands as a story of early intensity, followed by measured persistence. Jean Spiegel Howard as Mrs. Phelps. Mrs. Phelps, the gentle librarian who first believed in Matilda, was portrayed by Jean Spiegel Howard. At 69 years old, she embodied quiet refuge rather than spectacle. Her calm presence stood in stark contrast to the cruelty surrounding it. That serenity was built over a long, restrained life. Born on January 31, 1927, in Duncan, Oklahoma, Jean Frances Spiegel grew up in a poor rural household where survival outweighed ambition. She married actor Rance Howard in 1949, forming a lifelong partnership that shaped both her personal and professional choices. Together they raised two sons, Ron and Clint Howard, placing family above visibility for decades. In her later years, her health began to decline. Heart and respiratory illness gradually limited her strength, a condition she carried quietly while continuing to work whenever possible until it ultimately claimed her life. Her career unfolded slowly and unevenly. She appeared early in film but stepped back for years to raise her children, returning to acting in supporting roles across television and film. Appearances in Scrooged and Apollo 13 revealed her ability to leave a lasting impression in moments of restraint, while Matilda gave her one of her most enduring roles late in life. Sadly, Jean Spiegel Howard died on September 2, 2000, at the age of 73 in Los Angeles. She was laid to rest at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, beside her husband. With an estimated net worth of around $1 million, her legacy rests not on fame, but on presence. Quiet, maternal, and final. Jon Lovitz as Million Dollar Sticky Host. The Million Dollar Sticky Host, the manic game show ringmaster in Matilda, was played by Jon Lovitz. At 39 years old, he turned artificial cheer into satire, exposing excess with a smile stretched too wide. That exaggerated performance echoed his beginnings. Born on July 21, 1957, in Tarzana, California, Jonathan Lovitz grew up in a fractured household after his parents' divorce, an instability that fed both insecurity and timing. He never married, choosing independence over permanence, and his personal life remained secondary to career survival. His career peaked with Saturday Night Live, where characters like Tommy Flanagan earned him Emmy nominations and cultural recognition. After leaving SNL, momentum proved difficult to sustain. Projects such as The Critic and later films like The Wedding Singer kept him visible, but never restored the dominance of his early years. Today, he is 69 years old, continuing to perform stand-up comedy. With an estimated net worth of around $12 million, Jon Lovitz's career reflects a rise powered by precision, followed by endurance under pressure rather than reinvention. Time didn't spare the cast of Matilda. Childhood fame faded, paths split, and some lives took turns no one could have predicted. So who truly found peace, and who paid the highest price after the cameras stopped rolling? If this journey surprised you, like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. And tell us, which Matilda cast member's story shocked you the most in 2026?